Okay, so a lot going on there. First of all, on the I want to start with where you started, which is the executives who need a vision and don't know how to have a vision. And um, you also mentioned about the short-termism, if you like, of the NPV in a year. Well, here it's a quarter, so it's just like I don't. There's a lot to say there, right? So, but let's just start with that. Why is it so hard to have a vision right now? One of the reasons is because the narrative is exactly as we've talked about, this utopia, dystopia kind of thing. Um, I think any sensible executive doesn't believe that narrative, doesn't doesn't see how we could get to some sort of utopian UBI, blah, blah, whatever it is. They don't see a path to it because of our political situations and the reality of where we are right now. So they entertain the conversation because they don't have anything to push back on. They don't have their own vision of this. And there's a good reason why they don't have their own vision of this. And but they feel like they're stuck having to join a cult, and they don't want to join a cult. So how do you get that vision? And that's linked to how do you create an ROI for a longer term view? There's two answers to that. One is that creating a vision requires understanding whether this is different or not, whether AI is different as a technology. Now, I think it's going to be different because I think it's landing in our society at a particular moment at the end of the Great Acceleration. So you're probably familiar with the idea of the Great Acceleration, where you got all those charts going up and exponential, right? Now, we know that nothing continues exponential forever. What happens is you jump onto another curve, another exponential curve, and you sort of start again. Now, I think we're at that point. Now, that by definition means that the entire organizational structure changes, of the economy, of society, changes. And by definition, you've got no idea from within it what it's going to look like. So creating this vision is really, really hard for them. Now, we help people do that in a way they can create a vision that allows them to see some of these early indicators of what this phase shift might look like. So that's kind of one thing. The second thing is about the people themselves and the ROI on the people. And if you just accept the big tech proposition of it's all going to be automated, it's all going to go away, you've got a company of 100,000 employees now. That's going to go down to 1,000 employees that operate 1 million agents in doer role, right? Think about back to my three things. They're down there in the doer role, a handful of humans replacing all the hundreds of thousands that used to be there, and they're just going to hit the button for yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. Now, two problems with that. One is, who's AI? Your entire competitive advantage was based on your people, which you've switched out for machines that your competitors are also using. That just makes no sense. You've just eroded all your competitive advantage, and you've bought into the idea that what you're hoping for is this quote unquote mythical, slightly undefined AGI. Remember that AGI, artificial and general intelligence, has been redefined recently to mean a machine that can replace a human because it doesn't make the same mistakes as the AI we have today. It doesn't hallucinate, essentially. So you can replace your lawyer, your whatever it is, with this AI. But this is just whose AGI? And so then it circles back to where you get to, which is with one of the other questions that was nested in that initial question, is this a bubble? And I don't think it's a bubble because this compute is now going to be everything. We will organize around compute in some sort of way. So I don't think it's a bubble per se in terms of how we use compute. Whether investors get their money back, that's not necessarily whether we're using compute. It's about what investors think. Are they patient enough to wait for that compute to be used at a price that they're going to get their money back on? That's when this AGI argument comes in, because AGI has always been just this little bit ahead of us, and now it's like, I don't know, some people say it's already happened. Some people say it's next year. Some people say it's 2030. Some people say it's never going to happen, because we're all arguing about different distinctions. But if we just focus here on how it's about replacing a human, that's the current definition, in reality is the current definition, then it says, oh, okay, so you've got rid of, instead of having that 100,000 people, you've got rid of 50,000 of them, and you're kind of muddling on through. You're not doing anything new. You haven't really created, and you've got no new products, no new service. You don't really know where you're going, and you're waiting to fire those last 40,000 so you can get down to, or 49,000 so you can get down to the 1,000. Oh, well, you'll just have to wait. You'll just have to be patient. We're nearly there with AGI. And so that, to me, is where this becomes quite a dangerous conversation, because leaders are in a position where they don't have their own vision. They suddenly get, their patience gets captured, and so does the investors. And that's why I think it's so important for leaders to actually understand where we're at, so they can create their own vision, and they can have they can design their organizations so that the people that are in them become co-authors. You know, they go further to the top of the cube. They're using AI in really exploratory ways to create new products, new services, new value, rather than just sit and wait passively for everyone in their organization to be a doer with 1 million agents. Does that make sense? That's kind of my long story.
It does make a lot of sense. I'm going to come back to the vision because it's one of my biggest things that I love to do. I'm a big fan of, I help companies facilitate vision. And I always say the problem with these two brains that you have to have as an executive is, one is very quantitative and very rational, and the other one is almost esoteric. Right? Mm-hmm. It's kind of counter.
Well, it's value-based and it can be very ephemeral.
Yeah. And the other thing about vision, and this is how I explain vision. Vision is acknowledging that you don't know what the hell you're talking about in a lot of cases. You don't know what the future is, okay? But something within you have this fortitude within you. And that's why I'm a big fan of first principles, is to resort back. And when you're talking about humanism, is that tools need to serve human beings. If you start there and ask yourself, and this principle of self-determination, okay, I know the basic functions and features of AI. What do I want my AI to do? What is the beautiful future that I envision? That's where you need to start with a vision.